Ex-cons of Reddit who have served long-term sentences, 10 plus years. What was the biggest and most shocking changes you witnessed after being released? 14 years here. It's not so much the changes as it is your view of and insight into human behavior. You can see human behavior with such clarity, having learned to read people for survival. Having said that, the most shocking thing I experienced was people's unwillingness to look at themselves and refusal to look at reality. People out here have the luxury of building constructs that permit themselves to evade critical analysis of their own lives and failures. They refuse to accept government oppression for what it is, finding solace in television and other alternate forms of reality. It is very Matrix-like out here. Buddy of mine was in 10 years. 2003 he was sentenced and just released a couple of months back. Biggest changes he noticed were cell phones and the internet. There was no Facebook at the time and the cell phones were crappy, Sony Ericsson anyone. He spent days on Facebook using a friend's touchscreen phone and looking at porn. Never seen a guy so happy in my life. How fast things move on the outside. I saw an automobile once when I was a kid, but now they're everywhere. The world went and got itself in a big damn hurry. Luckily the parole board was able to get me into this halfway house. They called it the Brewer, and they got me a job bagging groceries at the Foodway. It's hard work for an old guy like me, but I try and keep up. But my hands hurt real bad most of the time. I don't think the manager likes me very much. Sometimes after work, I go to the park and feed the birds. I used to have a bird in prison, called him Jake, and I know it's unlikely, but I keep thinking, maybe someday, he'll stop by and say hello. He never does though. Hopefully wherever he is, he's doing okay and making some friends. I often have trouble sleeping at night, and have bad dreams where I'm falling. I'll wake up scared as can be, and it takes me a while to remember where I'm at after waking. Some people have told me to go to a therapist, but I know I can't afford it. Maybe I should get me a gun and rob the Foodway, so they'd send me back to prison. I feel like I belong there now. I could even shoot the manager while I was at it, sort of like a bonus. I guess I'm too old for that sort of nonsense anymore. I don't like it here. I'm tired of being afraid all the time. I've decided not to stay. I doubt they'll kick up any fuss. Not for an old crook like me. I'll likely go unnoticed. How much more expensive everything is in relation to minimum wage and the increase in property tax. In the 2000s it was much harder to get by than it was in the 1990s, but comparatively it's a smaller gap than the difference in 2000s to 2010s so far. Also the price of pizza is awesome. It's been right about the same price for like 20 years. My brother was passed out drunk in the backseat of a car. His friends decided to rob a gas station. Even though the outside video showed that he was out, he had even thrown up all over himself. He was there, and in Texas, if you are there you are an accessory. The next day, when he found out what his friends had done, he beat the hell out of them, and then turned himself in. He got 5 years, which is the minimum in Texas. The judge went easy the other two. One got 14 and the other got 15 years. Anyway, he went into prison in 1997 and got out in 2002. These are a few changes he talked about that were odd or big to him. When he got out, the zip code of where my parents had lived had changed. He tattooed the old zip code on his stomach, so that was funny. When he went in, computers cost over $1,000 for a middle of the road one and only a few people had cell phones, they all had pagers. When he got out everyone was starting to get them. Gas was $2.50 and up/gallon, and when he went in it was about $1. People were ultra paranoid because of 9/11. That was one of the biggest changes. He said the whole world went crazy with anti-Muslim stupidity, meaning how stupid people were being anti-Muslims. Just because some of them are fanatical a-holes, there were more. I have tried to get him on Reddit so maybe he will get on and post. I live in a town that has a federal and state prison in upstate Nye. I would ride the bus to go see my girlfriend at the time. I would leave to go see her on the weekends and ride the bus down to the city with all the inmates that just got out from doing their time. So you get on the bus and everyone would have the same white shirt, khaki pants, velcro shoes and brown bag. If you ever pulled out your cell phone, they would all ask to make a call on it, but they had no idea how to dial the number, so I would have to do it for them. That got old really fast. On one ride someone had a smartphone pulling up all the hit rap song from the last few years. It was funny how far behind they were. Some of them did have little clear plastic radios with earbuds. I don't think they worked all that well, and my hometown doesn't have any hip hop stations, so they were out of luck. The bus would also stop at a small store to pick up food, and they would go nuts just getting everything they had been missing out on. I assume candy, soda, cigarettes, extension. They were all really happy to just be out, I think. They talked a lot about what they were going to when they got home as well. A few years ago, I accompanied my stepfather to pick up his brother who had been in jail since the mid-70s. He asked us to stop at the first gas station he saw, and looking around, the biggest mindfuck he had was they sell soda in 3 liters. Oh my fucking god, I can drink 1.5-3 liters in one container? Who the fuck thought of this? This is fucking jive. Still using 70s lingo. He's sadly now back in jail for doing the same thing he did to go back in the first place. He was a cool dude, but some people just don't change. Answer by Michael Santos, author/speaker. On August 11th, 1987, D agents arrested me. I served the next 9,135 days in various prison settings. I wrote all about the journey in my book Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-year prison term, but that book concludes with the morning that my wife picked me up from the federal prison in Atwater on August 13th, 2012. Some people want to know what it was like to see the outside world for the first time after a quarter century of confinement. I'm doing my best to respond to those questions now. How does it feel? In order to prepare for my life upon release from prison, I used to wake very early. On the morning of August 13th, I remember waking before 3 a.m. I was confined inside of an open dormitory at the federal prison camp in Atwater, California. I sat at an empty table, amazed with the realization that my day had finally come. For decades I'd been waiting for my release date, but it always seemed so far away that I couldn't really grasp it. On that Monday morning, however, I woke with certainty that I was scheduled to walk out of prison gates. A commitment to exercise carried me through the entire journey, and I did not waver on the morning that I was going to be released. I did my strength training inside with push-ups, and I then walked outside to run. I finished my run at 6:15, then I returned to the housing unit for my shower and shave. Those activities felt different for me that morning because I still couldn't wrap my mind around the reality that in a few hours, authorities were going to release me. After dressing, I went outside to sit. I needed some alone time to gather my thoughts. I looked around at the track and wondered what it would feel like to walk out, and I also wondered how it was going to happen. At 7:15 I heard an announcement over the institutional loudspeaker. It paged me to the rear gate of the prison. Many prisoners sent me good wishes as I walked over toward that gate, my bag in hand with the books that I was carrying out with me. A guard eventually stepped out to meet me at the gate, and he escorted me inside one of the penitentiary buildings. My legs felt rubbery for some reason, perhaps because I was walking in an area of the prison that had previously been forbidden to me. The administrative process took about 30 minutes, and that was it. The guard then escorted me through a series of gates, and I saw my loving wife. She was standing there looking radiant, tears flowing down her cheeks, and holding prayer hands to her mouth, watching, as if in disbelief, that I'd finally be coming home to her. That was it. I was in her arms, and suddenly I was authorized to walk outside into the California sunshine. We held each other and kissed. Then we stepped inside of her car and began the long drive away from the Central Valley of California toward the great city of San Francisco. Sitting in the car beside her felt amazing. We'd been a couple for longer than a decade, but during our entire marriage we had only been together in the presence of guards. Suddenly we were in a private vehicle, alone. I felt giddy, in disbelief, wondering how long the joy would last, afraid that somehow it would end. My wife, Carol, handed me an iPhone. I'd never held a modern cell phone and I didn't understand how to use it. Carol showed me how to access a code that would unlock the phone and taught me how to place a call. While she drove, I used the phone to call my extended family. Everyone was in tears of joy. in disbelief that my time in prison had truly come to an end. Every second felt surreal, better than I could have ever imagined. I ate a pizza while Carol drove. I still feel the chills running through my body as I think about that moment. What are the experiences? As I write this response, nearly 5 full months have passed since I returned to society. In earlier Quora posts, I've written a lot about the journey. For example, I wrote about my need to learn how to drive again. I didn't know that I forgot how to drive, but when I sat behind the wheel of a car for the first time I realized that I didn't know what I was doing. I passed the driver's license exam, but my confidence as a driver did not return until I had driven several thousand miles. That was a problem, because I needed to drive from the halfway house in San Francisco to my job in Petaluma, about 40 miles north from the city. Every time I had to cross the Golden Gate Bridge, my sphincter tightened with fear. I've also had some challenges getting used to eating with silverware and real plates. During the entire time that I served in prison, I only ate with plastic. Metal now tastes strange in my mouth and it still feels strange for me to drink out of a glass. But those are minor issues, of course. There have been many great blessings associated with my release. I'm now able to eat any food that I want to eat, and many types of food were forbidden from me while I served my sentence. I'm able to wear different kinds of clothes from the type that were available to me in prison. Most importantly, I'm able to navigate the streets of a magnificent city and take in all of the wonders of being in society. It amazes me that as I walk down the street or enter into a business, no one knows that I was recently released from prison. The best experience, of course, is that I'm able to spend time with Carol. We married in a prison visiting room 10 years ago and now we are able to see each other several times each week. On weekends, I'm able to spend the night with her. In February, I'm scheduled to transition from the halfway house to home confinement and we'll begin living together for the first time. This blessing means more to me than anything else, and I'm immensely grateful. Do you consider the world has gone mad? Politically, there seems to be a lot more divisiveness in the country. We did not have the fair and balanced services of Fox News when I began serving my sentence, and back then, the invective of hate radio had not yet begun. The political fights in the media sound somewhat crazy. Even though I realize those fights cater to fanatics and they're in the business of selling advertising, it surprises me that citizens don't see how our reluctance to work together tears our country apart. From that perspective, aspects of the world do indeed seem a bit out of sorts. But even though the world is different from the time before my troubles with the criminal justice system, I wouldn't characterize the world as having gone mad. It's just different. I was born in 1964, and I grew up during a time when we were in a Cold War, but celebrating peace, for the most part. Soon after my imprisonment began, the Cold War ended, and a hot war began in the Middle East. That violence brought a lot of change. Suddenly the military was very active, and now our country pays a new price for that activity. Thousands of young men and women have gone off to fight, and when they returned, many veterans found that they didn't have as much support as it would seem that they needed. That's kind of sad, but an inevitable result of so much divisiveness that presides over our country. The political divisiveness or extremism doesn't make much sense to me. I'm biased, of course, because I served so much time in prison. But I see the criminal justice system as a national disgrace. It costs citizens billions to support, but it perpetuates cycles of failure. Even though scientific evidence shows that investment in education does far more to lower recidivism rates than warehousing human beings, the system keeps growing, locking more people in cages under harsher conditions. No one seems to care that prison budgets grow at unprecedented rates, while funds for social services like education, social services, and healthcare suffer. So yes, from that perspective, that does seem as if the world has gone mad. What about the clothes people wear now? Styles of clothing are certainly different now from when the time before my prison term began. It seems much more acceptable for people to wear very revealing clothing. This past weekend as I was returning to my halfway house, for example, I passed by the Warfield Theater while a line was forming for a concert by a group called Dead Z. Despite the temperatures being in the 40s, Young girls who were probably around 15 or 16 stood in line wearing extremely revealing bikinis and fishnet stockings. That seemed somewhat peculiar to me. I knew that I lived in a tolerant city, but it struck me as strange that parents would allow their daughters to attend a concert wearing such clothing or lack of clothing on a cold night in December. More than the clothing, I'm surprised at how mainstream tattoos and piercings have become in society. I saw a lot of tattoos in prison, of course, but I did not expect such a prominence of body art in society. How about all the technology? Technology is a big change, of course. I wrote a post recently that describes the type of technology that was available to me back in 1987. During the time I served, I read extensively about technology, but I didn't have opportunities to use it. While in prison I dreamed about accessing the internet directly. Now I have an iPhone, a MacBook Pro, and an iMac. I have a website that I'm trying to learn how to use effectively to promote my work. I'm contributing to Quora regularly, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, and to Twitter. But I don't really understand the best practices for social media, and so I'm frequently being reprimanded for being an advert. I didn't even know what that meant until my wife told me that I wasn't supposed to use social media to advertise my work. That didn't make sense to me. But there is a lot that doesn't make sense to me. I'm eager to learn more. Perhaps I'll have new perspectives in a few months. Every day brings me a greater sense of gratitude. I'm thankful to the users who asked me to respond to this question. Even though I rambled on, I hope you found my answers responsive to your questions. If not, I'll be happy to answer any other questions you may have. I'm an open book. Or, at the risk of being an advert, you can read more in my book Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Prison Term.